All right, cool. And we are live once again, back for a second round, of course, with Ron, Laurel, and Red, as we're chatting back, crawling back up the Devil's Backbone once again with Appalachian Horror. So we had so much fun. We had to do this again, and I feel like I should do some sort of like a magic fairy dust sprinkle where we just magically all changed our clothes and did like a wardrobe change or something. So I grew up on Mr. Dress Up, so it's not that far fetched to change clothes halfway through.
No, I,
So.
I did wear my Mothman shirt.
Oh,
I'm wearing
very
my
cool.
Mothman hoodie. We match.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Oh,
That's great. I'm
I
wearing
didn't
black,
know
so I'll
that.
try not to. There. That's super cool. So you guys, at least half of us are twins.
yes. And I forget because like the only hoodies I have are horror hoodies. And
Yeah,
so like I'll like take my son to school and like walk him in the morning and then I'm walking back. I'm like, oh right. 5-year-olds.
exactly. It's like, whoa, what's that? Yeah, I need to get some horror hoodies. I've got a couple that I have favorites. I'm like Linus and his blanket. I just wear the crap out of them
Oh,
until
same.
they're
Yeah.
practically falling off, and I don't care. It's comfortable. So
Yep.
it's my hoodie. It's my comfort zone. So I guess one of the things that I do want to talk to you guys about, and Ron, I think you would possibly be the first or the best person to maybe answer this particular question because you're kind of the one that I guess got the band all together. And of course, everybody knows that some of the best bands come in threes. I'm Canadian, so of course I'm going to refer to Rush on that analogy. But when I mean, we've all picked up phone book size anthologies, collections, and had an absolute blast doing it. They've got a fantastic way of being introduced to a lot of different stories of one author or a lot of authors all at once. But I really want to ask you though, when it comes to I guess a tighter anthology where you really are just getting that focused theme and three stories that are following that theme, what do you think are the benefits of that, of having a more streamlined, smaller anthology that contains these three stories that are all, have a connective flesh to them, as opposed to, say, a larger anthology where you've got 20 or 30 stories by maybe 20 or 30 different authors?
I think it's more being on the same page with like three people all together, rather than like 15 or 20 people writing separate stories trying to fit it into that one theme. So um, when I got the idea of Appalachian Horror, I originally had the backbone kind of going from Kentucky, Tennessee, North Carolina. But when James Newman dropped out,
Yeah.
and we got Red on board. Of course, you know, physically this fictional backbone did go across the lower half of Virginia, so that worked out great, and um, so I think it's I like these Dark Tide anthologies because it's like
Mhm.
three people concentrating. I don't think all the Dark Tides are all the stories are tied together. I don't believe it's
Yeah.
just novella length and on the same theme. But since we did the Devil's Backbone with kind of um, a continuing theme over a certain period of time, I think that it worked out really well.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree with that. And I love the fact too that it sort of sinks us into a specific frame of mind for a bit of a longer stretch, as opposed to, you're kind of in the zone with one specific theme and one specific, I guess, attack on a portion of the horror realm, so to speak. And then you're kind of on to the next one. And so you're out of that. So it's kind of nice to be able to have, at least I find anyways, that they gave kind of a bit of a lingering effect as well. So you could really, really get in there, really get to know that Appalachian horror and then be able to see it from the three different perspectives. I think in this particular case anyways worked really well.
I think so.
So I thought it was a really cool idea to do that. So no, I really, really appreciate that. And I know for yourself as well, Red. One of the things that uh, I found in this as well is that I know certainly through some of your other stories as well, you really use some pretty alluring destinations that certainly is really tough, to resist, and of all of its charm and the promises it offers, etc. On a good day. But then, of course, you take it a few darker steps further than that, and show us that even these beautiful locations that you've been to, that you've taken us to, end up providing some pretty awesome, immeasurable pain and lots of suffering. What do you think?
What I do.
Yeah. What happened to you, Red? What are you trying to do to us? What do you think it is that draws us to such threatening places despite our knowing better? I mean, obviously, when we're in your story, we have no choice. We're just going to go wherever you drag us to. But I think certainly in real life as well, there's always that allure of, well, that's a really spooky place. We shouldn't go there. So we're going to go there and find out. And, sometimes in real life, it ends up well. Sometimes it doesn't. In your stories, it always ends up horribly wrong. So what do you think it is that kind of draws us into those places that are dangerous, that we probably shouldn't go to?
Oh, well, everybody's probably a little different. And it's
Sure.
probably anything from the thrill of adventure, stepping outside and doing something that is not the mundane everyday, get up, go to work, come home, do the dishes, like everybody wants a little more, or maybe it's just the unknown, or trying to answer those unanswerable questions, like what is the meaning of life, or do ghosts
Sure.
exist, are there really monsters, what is down in the dark cave, and we don't know unless we go check it out, unless we go check out that noise in the backyard, or the weird shadow figure in the forest. Like, if we don't check it out, then we'll never know, and
Right.
not knowing is boring.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a super good point too. And I mean, the nice thing too is that we've got folks like all of you that can take us to these places and help us to maybe answer and explore some of these locations, knowing that we might come out with some mental scars, but at least physically we're probably going to be okay. So it's it's much appreciated. And
I never go to those places, by the way. I'm the one that never checks out anything. Stay home. I'm like, oh, I heard something. Nope, not me. Someone else
Exactly.
can go check it out.
Credits roll. The shortest
read
horror
the
movie
book.
ever.
Yeah, exactly. I read the book. There might be a spider there. Leaving that alone.
I have been.
So, and I guess kind of on the flip side of places, Laurel, I really want to ask you this as well, since you do. I mean, the entire book is about a pretty magical and often, I guess, devious place, which is the Devil's Backbone, and throughout the Appalachians, and the Devil's Bathtub. You're with your story, Laurel. Of course, you're talking about you put sort of an old school twist on the modern complication of your witches that are really in a world. And the neat thing I like about that, of course, is that in our modern world, everybody has an online persona, and until you really get to, I guess, to know them, they're still, at least for me, maybe I'm just paranoid that way, but I'm still left kind of wondering, maybe who is truly safe to trust, no matter how kind or how given a person that they may seem. What does it mean for you to be able to explore that aspect of humanity and trust, I suppose, with your story within the Devil's Backbone with Spirit Coven?
Oh, as far as like trusting like the sisters trusting one another, or the way that trust kind of flips on its head when everything goes to hell, kind of thing.
Exactly. It's like they all, how your witches almost have. Sorry, don't mind my cat. This video is
I love the
sponsored
little-
by my cat's butthole. So you wake up in the morning, and you never know which end of her you're gonna get. You just hope for the best and
Usually-
open your eyes really fast.
Probably get
and-
both, just back and forth. But
It's funny because she never stays still. That's exactly what you get.
Yeah.
She's like, I'm going to make sure you're fully satisfied. So you're going to get both.
just get all of it.
But going back to your story though, that's exactly what I meant. More of the dynamics that you have with the witches and the folks, the folks at the bottom of the mountain, where they have a working trust with each other, and it's almost a hopeful trust, or maybe that trust hasn't necessarily been earned, but it's something that they find works until it doesn't.
Yeah, it's in some ways, in their case, it's a little bit symbiotic. If you want to look at it from a more like transactional standpoint, it's that their ability to provide alcohol, continued provision of what is being denied the rest of the country, is part of what's kept people there a little more, I don't want to say complacent because it's not like they're like drugging them, but it's like,
Right.
hey, this is something that, you're still able to have here because of what we're doing. And, it's these cures sort of thing that they're able to provide. So, I mean, if you wanted to look at it from a cynical perspective, it's transactional. And when there is a perceived cost that is greater than the perceived good, things flip. But it is to me, it's so interesting to study human nature and the ways that we interact with each other. Um, and the way that we fill in the blanks sometimes for each other on like
Mhm.
motivations. I see it so often. I do it myself a lot, and I'm trying very hard to learn to stop and step back and ask myself what information I really have, because
Mhm.
you mentioned the online personas and sort of the online world in which we meet, and I wouldn't know any of you folks if it weren't for that. So I certainly
Right.
am not going to paint it with a brush and say that it's all bad. I've gotten an immense amount of joy, and my career has really benefited from it. But I do think that there's a lot of nuance that is denied in some of those situations, particularly when you're talking on a larger scale. And so again, it really is the filling in the blanks, because how often, and I don't want to, say that anyone else has these thoughts, but for me, a lot of times,
Mm.
like I will find myself being like, well, literally the only reason she could have done that is because she wanted this to happen, and there's no other reason she could have done it. So, screw her. And, this is what this is going on with. And it's like, but
Yeah.
you can never know what someone else's motivations are, what's going on in their head. And it's not just a matter of like, oh, you don't know what everyone's dealing with, which is true. You don't. But
Right.
someone could really have just been like, I just asked the question because I didn't know which kind of juice you wanted. I didn't, mean to start this whole
Yeah.
battle kind of thing. And so, I in looking at those conflicts with the witches and with the citizens of Arnett, I kind of wanted to, I didn't want it to be like an immediate like, everyone's evil or any of this kind of thing. It's a matter
Yeah.
of
Burn all the witches.
yeah, yeah. Well, and I mean, there's that fear. They're aware. Hey, this is the kind of thing that can flip. Not just because we're witches, but because we're independent women.
Yeah.
And that sort of like they're an easy target sort of thing. So, but I wanted to kind of explore a lot and make it less of a, good versus evil, or a, people being mindless or anything. It's people. People are afraid. When people are
Yeah.
afraid, and when people are worried for themselves or for their families, a lot of times they look at what they can do to resolve it. And unfortunately, sometimes that becomes, who do we eliminate? Who do we blame?
Mhm.
Who can we choose to do something to stop this kind of thing? So I don't
Right.
know, it's interesting. And the older I get, the more I really try to work on that stopping, taking a step back. And even if someone is coming after me, it doesn't mean I have to put up with it, but I can say, I wonder what's behind this. I wonder what
Right.
someone is feeling threatened by, that this is happening, sort of a thing.
Yeah, and I think that's really hard, no matter how much experience you have, having those first impressions either turn out completely right or completely wrong. I mean, just even today, I found a different perspective of somebody's motivation that resulted in a really horrible thing that caused a bit of a witch hunt on this person, and
Mhm.
in a sense, rightfully so. But then understanding some of their motivations and their better intentions, where maybe sort of think, yeah, it's still pretty bad, but at least it's not brought on by something that was intentionally bad. And I think that's super tough to do. I think certainly, I mean, as I've grown older as well, I think that, certainly as you bring in more information, that should also be part of your, how you filter your perspectives. But of course, that's not always the case. As with your witches, and back in the day with Salem, they they weren't exactly stopping and taking notes on and gathering more information and talking about the witches. They're just like, oh, you must go.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I love that dynamic that you changed things up a little bit too, and you made it so it wasn't so cut and dry, where there's a bit of more complexity to that, which I think is definitely the case of real life. So it was a really cool twist with modern world and and that extra twist with the old school witches as well.
Thank you.
So, yeah. Hey, Alex, good to see you here as well, buddy. Thanks for
Thanks.
stopping by as well. And I'm a little bit new to this too, so I'm going to see if I can. Hey, I can. Cool. That was magic. Right on.
Well done.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That's
Yeah,
something that it takes a lot of time though to retrain those instincts,
Yeah. Yeah, no, it really, really does. I mean, centuries later, and I'm sure there's still a lot of people that think the witches are real, and especially now with the cancel culture. God, I wouldn't want to be a witch now. good witch or not, it's like you and everybody has got to go. So,
I've noticed the last few days, with the whole AI blow up, about AI
yeah,
covers and writing and stuff that, there's been, I've seen some people online kind of being suspicious of certain publishers and certain,
right,
people's thinking, are you using AI to do this or that? And, we've all seen, stuff like this blow up before in social media, and publishers crash and burn because of it. So, it's good to kind of step back and really take a breather and take a close look at what is actually happening, because people people can get hurt, but I'm definitely not for AI at all,
no,
especially with cover art and stuff like that, because I use all art covers. I never
Yeah.
use AI or anything like that, but I've seen some like emotions come to the surface the last few days because of that.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
think rightfully so. I mean, when I met you at the con, at the author con, Ronald, I think that was like one of the first things that I noticed was these incredible covers that you had, and even yourself too, Red. I mean, you're such an awesome artist as well, so you certainly would take that to heart, and obviously firsthand how much work goes into these things. And I mean, when it comes to the book, we're only seeing the finished product and we think, oh, that's pretty easy, right? You just whipped it up last night. We don't see all the sweat and the blood and all the years it took for you to get to that point as well. And AI just comes along and just kind of erases all that, makes it look easy. And
yeah, it's getting scary.
it is. And I hope the technology picks up where we can realize that kind of stuff, or that at least, and this is the one thing that my paranoid self has more of a difficult time with, is hoping that we pick up on the innuendos and listen to or feelings that we're seeing some red flags. I mean, I was watching a YouTube video earlier today for my son, and we've seen some of these things before. It was a Minecraft, and we really don't like watching most of that stuff because a lot of it's violent. Some of it where they're doing some building, that's not so bad. But then I was watching this and I was just listening to him. This dialogue just seems really odd, and it's very repetitive, and it's not making any logical sense. And I think these videos are now made by AI. These people have an audience, and then it's clear that these AI GP, whatever it is, chats are just taking over. And I'm thinking, what's next? Somebody's going to have a conversation with Stephen King, but it's not actually Stephen King. He's having these outlandish responses. It happened recently with, I don't really watch them, but
George
I heard
Carlin. Was that the one?
well, I didn't hear about that one. There's probably so many to keep up with, but I know I was thinking Joe Rogan apparently had a conversation with Pierre Trudeau, Justin Trudeau rather, on his podcast. And I didn't listen to it because I don't really care for his podcast, but it just goes to show that it could be very believable, and you just don't know. So I really hope that our technology eventually comes to fruition and picks up on that kind of stuff, where at least we're catching a lot of it. Yes, shout out to the human artists. Absolutely.
Well, there is no AI in the Devil's Backbone.
No,
None at all.
Guaranteed.
AI free. So, and speaking of things that AI absolutely can't do for you, thank you very much for the segue, Red. Ron, I do want to ask you as well. So when you set out, when you're writing supernatural tales, certainly if you're talking about just general ghosts, you can make up anything and it's real in your stories. But when it does come to writing up supernatural tales that are also involving, folklore and magic and otherworldly entities, they might have some historical references to them and history to them. How much, if any, research do you put, Ron, into, into either some inspiration or direct realism as you're putting together your first drafts, since
Well,
AI is not going to do that for you and
yeah,
should?
yeah. A lot of it just comes from stories I've heard, since I was a kid and all that. Ghost stories and tales of cryptids and stuff like that. Now, if I'm actually writing like on a real legend or something, I do do a little research, and see, read all the different accounts and everything, and to try to get it as close to the storytelling version that is like truly told in those areas and everything. So yeah, I just I kind of, a lot of times I wing it, but sometimes like I did do a story about there was supposedly a woman, maybe a witch, called Soap Sally up in the Virginia, Maryland area, and I wrote a ghost story about that, and I did do a lot of research on that because that's something I never heard of down here. But yeah, I pretty much go by old stories my grandmother told me or family told me, and kind of build a story around that.
Yeah, very cool. And you can't top that kind of stuff too, because of course it's going to have a sort of more personal relevance as well, since it's coming down from your, from your grandparents and your family as well. That one can only assume they probably maybe put their own spin into it as well, just as it works, I guess, throughout the years. Every story is going to change a little bit as the as the relatability to that story, I would imagine, changes as well. So that's really cool. So you really do put, it sounds like, a lot of family history through the storytelling into your stories, which I think
I think that just comes naturally with me. It's just I heard so many stories from the time I was like 5 till 25.
yeah.
And it's about around the time my grandmother passed away, and all the stories just kind of stuck with me because nobody else, there was no more vocal storytelling after that. So it was like I automatically kind of started transferring it into fiction, in a fictional way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm very grateful for that as well. And hey, Blue, thanks for joining us as well. And yeah, always people excited about AI. Never watched the Terminator. So true. That's what AI is going to get us. And it's going to have nothing to do with a large, naked, muscle-bound man.
Dang.
I mean, I guess it could. It's
Not with the
AI,
bone at the end of the world. Come on.
Exactly. Well, it's it's not written in stone, I'm sure, yet. So there might be some hope yet. The one thing I did want to ask you as well, too, Red. So I guess, sort of speaking of, sort of touching on the relatability of personal experience. I know that you've, to say the very least, you've also never shied from, infusing some of your own personal experiences into your exploration of all things dark and terrifying with your stories. And, considering that you're married to a military man, in this story, your story happens to take place, The Gatherer happens to take place during the Vietnam War. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that this story is no exception as far as, maybe infusing some of your experiences, maybe not directly on the battlefield, but certainly secondhand and living within that military dynamic. How do you, I really want to ask you, so how do you feel that your stories benefit most by infusing such personal experiences into them? And if I can sort of piggyback on my own question, which I'm apt to do, how do you feel that you personally might benefit from infusing your personal experiences into the stories that you tell?
I think all stories are going to benefit, just putting a little bit of our own experiences in there, because whatever the experience is, whatever trauma it is or whatever horrible thing someone may have gone through. If you know the pain, if you know the experience, if you've been through it, it's going to read truthfully. It's going to read a little more, what's the word, authentically on the page than someone who hasn't. I don't know how many times I've read a book and knew for a fact that this person could not possibly have children. just by the way that the child was written, the way they talk, the way they act. I'm like, I don't think they know what kids are like. So it's like, just, having those experiences does help. And I'm not saying just because someone doesn't have kids, they can't write kids, or if you haven't been through an experience, you can't write that experience. But you got to do your homework. You got to talk to people. I feel like I'm missing part of. I know there was more to the question, but I don't remember what it was.
No problem at all.
The military. With this one, I don't feel I put any of myself into this story, particularly when it came to military. I felt not removed from it, but in that respect. So I'm a military spouse, a modern day military spouse, and this is like Vietnam and their brothers. And I'm Vietnam War, going overseas was a lot different, I presume, than it is today. So I maybe subconsciously there was a little bit of me in the character that was waiting at home for, her fiance to come home from war. But for the most part, I don't think I wrote too much of myself into her.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, I know, of course, with the military, at least from what I understand, I don't have firsthand or even second or third hand experience other than maybe watching documentaries and whatnot too. That certainly there's a very real brotherhood when it comes to war. So maybe that aspect of it helped you with the dynamics between these two actual brothers during the Vietnam War.
Yeah. So I know a lot of military people, and I've known people have been through some things. So but for this, it really did. I think a lot of the inspiration I had for this were the things that I watched, the documentaries I've seen on Vietnam, the experiences that those men who came back, the stories they've told. So I pulled a lot from those external what's the word, like documentaries and articles and things that I've read. That's where I pulled most of it from for this story.
Very cool. And when you are putting in, and I guess the second part of the question then, so not to let you get away that easy. When you are putting in the more personal stuff in there, do you find, is there a specific benefit that you have or that you get out of putting that in there? Or is it more a matter of this is part of your wall that you're able to draw from rather to get that authenticity across, and that's really all that it is? Or do you find that there's maybe something else that's being exercised or beneficial to you by inserting such personal stuff in there? Perhaps not with this one, but even with some of the other ones that you've written.
It's usually just the well I pull from, but every once in a while I'm surprised to learn. It's almost like therapy, to just learn a little bit about myself or why I am the way I am now because of the things that happened in the past. So sometimes I'm writing and I get really deep into the emotional part of whatever a character may be going through, and she might have a reaction or not react to something, and I think, oh, well, that makes sense.
Do you ever learn anything about yourself only after reading it in your character's dialogue and be like, wow, that's a big revelation. I think I need to go back to therapy.
Yeah.
or go to a different therapist. Yeah. And I'm sure you guys have all experienced that as well. And I think it's a really weird position to be in, I think, when you're writing about such real characters that maybe you don't realize how realistic that they are to you until you read them back and think, wow. So that, like you said, Red, that really explains a lot of maybe some of the I don't know, idiosyncrasies that you might have, or some of the really positive stuff that you're able to get through because of what you've been through without realizing it until you've written it out in a book. And it's almost kind of a weird mix of like bliss and scary and shock and, you know, what the hell. So.
Another thing written so my mom can say, "What's wrong with you?"
It's like, well, you're going to have to read the next book, Mom, to find out. So no, and again, I really appreciate all the time here, guys. So you guys have been absolutely amazing, and I appreciate too, because I know that certainly when it comes to Appalachian horror, and I think it's tough, and probably especially in your stage of the game as well, with writing the stories that you have, it's really tough not to infuse some of your personal stuff in there. So I think it's awesome too that you guys have been so forthcoming with, you know, kind of talking about that a little bit. And, you know, kind of going back as well to where you're a little hesitant to trust somebody. I almost find it's the opposite with horror writers, because when all you know about them is simply what you're finding about them online and through their stories, you might think that, wow, these are some pretty scary people, but then you actually get to meet them or get to spend a bit more time with them, whether it's alone in a dark room or in a crowded lit area, you realize they're actually some of the best people, I think, because they're out there, they're exercising their demons, and they're able to sleep comfortably with the lights off at nighttime.
I leave my light on.
That's awesome. Yeah, and that's a really good way to, Alex. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I know part of the pandemic when I was locked away, when first wave of COVID was happening, I worked for a long-term care place, and I know I showed up one day for work, and it was in, I don't know, February something, and I had a scratchy throat, so they sent me home for 2 weeks. Well, test results came back, and I thought, what the heck am I going to do? And I ended up writing a short novel, and there's some parts of it I know where I wrote, and like, wow, I didn't know all this stuff. Apparently I haven't gotten over that one yet. like you know, like Laurel's advice to Red, if you come across that stuff, you might want to look for another therapist or something.
Red, it was funny though what you said about, like, you know, when you read something from someone and you're like, wow, that, you know, they don't have children or they whatever, like it's very like so like Silent Key took me forever to write, and I actually had written, I think, the first like couple of drafts before I had my son. And then when I was going back to it to do revisions before I sold it, I was like, this bitch is way too chipper to have a small child. Like, she's like, she gets up in the morning, she seems cheerful. And that is not, I mean, I love my kid. I love being a mom. But you know what I'm saying? When she's like, like chipper, I'm like, no, that's not going to happen for, I don't even know how long. So just bring it down a notch.
Exactly.
Because even your own writing and being like, yeah, you didn't have the experience for that yet.
Yeah. It's like you get those nice, happy, chipper days. It's like, you know, you worked for that, and you just came through battle to get to that chipper day. So you need to recognize.
Like, also, like you're in a sleep deficit, so maybe you got some sleep, and that just means you're like, over your third cup of coffee instead of your fifth. So.
By the third cup of coffee, I can start talking about Minecraft.
Yeah.
Whatever game he's talking about.
Whatever the obsession of the week is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, you can definitely tell that as well. And I think it really does make the difference between, I suppose, telling about something as opposed to, you know, really drawing somebody into that shared experience where it definitely does make a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed reading some of my old stuff, you know, when I first started writing in the horror genre, that you know, I was a single man with most of my early short stories and the first new novels I did for Zebra, and then I got married and had kids, and I can see a significant shift in my writing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I became a husband and a father, you know.
Mm-hmm.
There's some stuff in the earlier stuff that, you know, I think, well, who wrote that? You know, it wasn't this time, you know. So
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, when your experiences, world experiences, and life experiences, you know, change, you know, evolve, then I think your writing does too. You know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I would think it would have to, you know, almost, because otherwise you just be writing the same stuff with the same perspective, and you know, and I think that's part of, you know, kind of even what you were talking about earlier, Ron, with having that that handed down uh, oral stories and oral history as well. That has to change, I suppose, as you have more history yourself. You've got those more experiences, and you've got some of that innocence, I suppose, that ends up being kind of jaded because you have to adjust to, whether we like to admit it or not, very much a jaded world and how we respond to that. And then of course you have kids, and that just changes everything. And for better, for worse, and richer and poorer, till death do you part, and all of that, all that happy stuff. So yeah, I think so too. Like under pressure, yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah. And I think that's, and you can, I don't think that's something you could fake either. I know I've certainly read stories where you could tell someone who's just trying to think about what certain situations would be like, and then you really see what those situations are truly like through the voice of people that have been through them.
You can really see, though, I feel like horror is such an empathetic genre. Because what scares you is this very central facet of your being, and it's different for everyone, and how we react to it is different. And so, yes, I mean, certainly, like, I feel more comfortable critiquing it in my own writing, like, you didn't know anything about having kids back then. But it's certainly, I mean, I've read, stories from people. I think it's more about, can you get in that headspace? Do you care enough? Are you writing about it because it's just a throwaway scenario, or are you in that headspace? Did you observe, a young father exhausted trying to keep up with two kids, while one of them's getting
Right.
sick in the middle of a Cracker Barrel? And did you look at with empathy at, what he's doing and how he reacts? And did you get in his head for a minute? Because you can translate that stuff onto the page without living in the experience.
Right.
But it's can you get there, and do you care enough to do so? How did this come to you? Kind of a thing. And I also don't want to set it up as though that almost sounds like it being like, all right, did you pass the Hightower test? Like, was your empathy sufficient? It's not that. It's more just like a matter of two, because I want to make it, I wouldn't want to discourage anyone from writing about something they hadn't directly experienced, because again, with that empathy, we can really tap into those things.
I was about to say the same thing, but not nearly as well as Laurel. So yeah, because I felt like I was being judgmental of like people who haven't experienced it, as if they shouldn't write about it, and that's not the case at all.
Sure, and they probably have experienced things because they don't have kids that we can no longer maybe experience or relate as well to, that they can,
like sleeping
in. Like sleeping in, those bastards. All that sleep and all that freedom.
We can write about being a doctor without being a doctor. You just have to do your homework. You can write pretty much whatever you'd like to write, as long as you do your homework and do it well.
Yeah, and I think you make some really good points with that too, Laurel. And honestly, I'm a little embarrassed to say that I hadn't really thought of that before, is that it takes a lot of empathy and a lot of compassion and caring to quote unquote go there. When you're writing about something and about somebody that went through some serious pain, do you pull back, or do you go all out to try to really help to understand what that person went through? Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I feel like Jonathan Janz is like the quintessential example of that, because he is like, his books were some of the first I read when I got into indie horror. And it's like, you read like The Siren and the Spectre, and you read The Dark Game, and like some of the most heinous stuff happens, and people are cruel and horrible and vicious. And you meet him, and he is legitimately like the nicest person on the planet.
He is.
But when you listen to him speak, and he gives the gift so often of being so open. He will like tell a story in a panel that just like gets you just right here, and he's willing to be vulnerable with that. And you can see that he has this empathy that contributes to all of that. He experiences, and I may be just, projecting and assuming, sorry, Jonathan, but, like you can tell in the way that he reacts to people, and the way he genuinely has compassion for what people are going through, and he stops to understand things. And you're like, okay, this is the kind of mindset that it takes to get into those headspaces and find that empathy, and then scare the crap out of somebody by getting in there. So it's, I don't know. I feel like those things actually really do go hand in hand.
I think so. I would agree. And I know, even today, I was, not that he needs my defense post-mortem or not, but every once in a while, it almost feels like every few months, somebody's going to mention the girl next door and how
Oh, yeah,
they're
Jack.
pissed off
Yeah.
because it was a bunch of exploitative crap and it was just a money grab. And how could they do something like this? And, having chatted with, Dallas Mayor, Jack, who we all know as Jack Ketchum, or fans know as Jack Ketchum. I've chatted with him a few times, knowing that really pissed him off. I think he found newspaper articles when he was cleaning out his mom's attic after she had passed away, and he read about this with the Sylvia Likens case, and it disturbed him. It really pissed him off. And I think people, and probably a lot like Jonathan Jans, when you're writing about real life travesties, I think what a lot of people don't realize, or what they maybe don't work to try to realize, is that this is hurting the writers as well, and they're going there because they care, because it's important to help the readers go there and to understand. And if they're pissed off or they're disturbed or they're disgusted, that's actually the point. So they can go on and they can talk to me, well, this really pissed me off and this really upset me. Okay, well, why did it upset you? Why did that make you angry? Well, guess what? That person's people that these things have actually happened to are a lot more pissed off and they're a lot more angry, and they're hoping that other people that maybe haven't gone through that cannot go through that, but still understand a little bit, I think, of what they went through. And I think that's a lot of the power of the horror genre specifically. Certainly, I mean, and it could be wrong, I could be completely biased, but I haven't seen, I don't hang out with those, the romance groups, not to, throw shade at them, but I don't know if there's a lot of people talking about how this romance is absolutely being exploited through the talking about a romantic tryst in a novel. I'm not sure that it works the same way as it does with horror and the horror genre and readers' reactions to it. So
Could be.
I know that's my rant about that, I suppose. to your point. So, hey, Mark, thanks a lot for jumping in here as well. Yeah, absolutely. I will definitely do that. So we will put you in for that. And
Is that Mark Wagner from Lexington? Of course, I don't know if he's still active in there, but that'll be very interesting if that's Mark Wagner that I knew for multiple years in school. But anyways, sorry for the aside. If it is, hi.
Yeah.
And if it's not, either way, glad you're here. Whichever Mark Wagner you happen to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll wait for him. I'm sure he's maybe typing away, or if you want to keep your identity secret, Mark, that's okay too.
That is also okay. I'll never.
Not that we're all not curious now to know who you are. And while you're deliberating whether or not to reveal your true identity, Mark, one thing I want to ask all of you as well is, going back to the Devil's Backbone, is that when the readers have finished putting these awesome stories down, when they've turned on the lights because the stories were just that effective for them, and maybe you guys all have the same answers, I'm not sure, but what do you find is your ultimate goal when you think of a success? So what is it that you're hoping that readers ultimately are going to be taken away from them, specific to these stories? Maybe that's a little bit different from some of the other stories that you've written, because I don't want to make the question too easy for you guys to answer. And if I don't know, Ron, if you want to go first, since you're the band leader.
I just hope they're entertained, and they just, they've been taken someplace that they haven't been before. Maybe, met a few people in the stories that they could relate to, and maybe some people that they have never met before, and just that they carry this around in their head for a while, and because I've read books, that I've been carrying around my head for like 50 years, and it'd be great if people kind of lingered in the Devil's Backbone for a while, after they put the book down.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. What about you, Red?
Yeah, good answer. I like, with everything I write, I like to make some kind of impact on the reader, some kind of emotional impact. I want them to walk away either feeling like they've been stabbed in the heart or punched in the gut or maybe laughing, you know,
Yeah.
any kind of
All
just
the above.
any kind of reaction, any kind of
Yeah.
emotion. Like I just want them to walk away, like Ron said, entertained, but also just impacted in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about yourself, Laurel? Pretty much along the same lines, or anything extra? Maybe a newfound love for witches and bourbon.
I will say that part of the reason I was excited to write about witches was I read the Conjuring the Witch by Jessica Leonard. And that was just stellar. And you talk about books that live in your head. Geez, like, she took a very different tactic with it. And it was just, man, that was really, really good. But yeah, I mean, ultimately from a goal of what I want people to take away, yes, entertained, because it's, that's what I always loved about reading horror, was just sort of disappearing into it. So feeling entertained, but there's also a part of me that wants to, without being preachy, like what I would like to pass on is maybe some of that empathy as far as like seeing our fellow humans. Again, a lot of the work that I've been doing, like personally, for like meditation and that sort of thing, has to do with what you can do to ease suffering for yourself and just for the rest of the world. And so much of it comes down to struggling against one another and struggling against circumstances, instead of and closing our hearts and putting on our armor, instead of taking that armor off and opening our hearts to each other, which is a hard and a scary thing to do. But the more that we see, I don't know, the more that we see each other as human, and we see like those those walls that we put up, the more that we see them come down. So I don't know, in all of my stories, that's kind of what I would love to achieve, is just a little bit more of that connection. Whether you connect with somebody that you didn't think that you would, or whether you like see something and say, wow, okay, I never saw it from that perspective. I would love it if people walked away feeling just a little bit more open to one another at the end.
Awesome. That's a very good objective.
One of the things I liked about Laurel's story is she really
Yeah.
humanized the witches, where a lot of times in these stories and that we read, that the witches are usually villainous, and we have this certain mindset about what they're all about. But Laurel just totally turned it around for me, and I really enjoyed how she did it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Big accolades. And Mark, you mentioning that you tend to enjoy some of the more classic stuff like Jekyll and Hyde, Nosferatu, Frankenstein. I think we're probably all fans of that stuff here. It sounds like this would really resonate with you as well. Certainly with Jekyll and Hyde, and absolutely with Frankenstein. It was really, they were definitely stories about humanizing the monsters. So this sounds like this would be right up your alley. And I'm happy to say that both yourself and Blue, I'm definitely going to be sending you guys a digital copy of the book as well. So cheers to you, dudes. So awesome. So if Blue and Mark, Blue, I've got your contact information, of course, because I've seen you around. We've talked once or twice through Cemetery Dance. So I'll send you an email. Mark, wherever in the world you are, if you want to send me a private message with your email or Facebook, what have you, I'll be happy to send over a copy for you. So make sure that happens. So awesome. Well, on that note, thank you very, very much, guys. Again, I really appreciate your time ×2. So you guys are amazing. So thank you very much. Is there anything else that I maybe left out, or anything else that you guys want to say in parting as we kind of climb back down the Appalachian mountain here?
I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who showed up in the chat too. Alex, you show up so much, and I want you to know how appreciated that is. It really is. So much of this is showing up for each other. And so everyone
Absolutely.
who did, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, definitely kudos, Alex, I just had a brain fart, but yeah, definitely echo what Laurel just said too. Yeah, you're definitely a guy that shows up, so I appreciate it. And Alex was actually my host when I was at the AuthorCon last year, and made it so much better. He set up our hotel. He drove us back to our hotel, but my bags were too big to carry books, so I was able to get more books. And there's no such thing as more books, just not enough shelves. So Alex went a long way to help me get more books. So appreciate that too. So, all right, awesome. Well, thank you very much, guys. I hope you guys all have an amazing night, and I look forward to reading more amazing stories from you all. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Okay, cheers, guys. Bye.
Bye.